right, it's officially 2 o'clock, so let's get this show on the road. I'm Professor Hot Mess. This is LGBTQ plus representation in anime and manga. I'm part of BL Garden of DFW. If you've been to our other big panels, we often go to cons and do All Yaoi Considered and BL 101, among other materials. I often do health and wellness panels, as well as my Ask Dr. Fuja, where I do sexual health, and plus my LGBT. And we do Ita bags and all sorts of like shippy fandom things. Please follow us if you want to at See, I don't do social media well, so they gave me this in the spiel and I forgot what it was already, but we have podcasts that are very cool. You can find more at blgardendfw.com, or Twitter is at blgardendfw. Me, I'm important. This is about me. Who am I and why am I doing this? And the answer is science. I'm an anime nerd with a science background who got into BL through gravitation, if anybody remembers that. Anybody as old as I am? Woo, yay! Yeah. I joined a college anime club, and someone put on gravitation, and it was like an entry-level drug. It was the early 2000s. It was a wild time. It led me to GL, which is girls' love. So I'll get into this later, but BL and yaoi is like boys' love or male-male relationship stories, and GL is like the opposite, girls' love. This actually made me, my love of these works made me question my own sexuality before I came out as bi. It was a little bit of a struggle bus, but I got there. Anime has helped people in many different ways. I originally loved whatever could get my hands on, even if it's the trashiest like hentai and like was poorly written, bad censorship. If it was wrapped in Borders or Barnes & Noble, I knew it was good. I just took in everything, and it was then I started to, I guess I got fake woke. And I was like, oh no, is what I'm reading good or bad? And I started to question myself on everything. Like, what I was reading, watching stereotypical? Some things are. Was it harmful to real LGBT people if it had like a poor portrayal of a character? Like, I was obsessed with these fictional people harming real people by existing, and it got me in a bad mental state. Eventually I got full circle because I went too far the other way. Because life is a circle, you just kind of go around. I met BL Garden and I started learning about ship and lit ship, which is like a theory of like what you like, and what you like that's fictional doesn't have to reflect reality. Like, one of my friends in BL Garden always says, women like murder podcasts a lot, right? But has murders by women gone up since murder podcasts existed? Not that we know of.
We're just smarter at not getting caught.
Yeah. Fiction, what you like in fiction doesn't define you who you are in reality. Just if you like some like certain spicy manga doesn't mean you're running around knocking over, like, you know that, does anybody want to be a very uncomfortable demo for something? Okay. So, what you might find like hot in manga panels or in anime or movies, you might not do in the real world. We're not throwing random people to the ground and getting, yeah, in general, unless you consent first. That's different. Consent, yeah, consent's key. I started to enjoy things for what they were. Things that are meant to be enjoyable, enjoy them. So ship and lip ship. If you like something, if you're super into it, I have colleagues They're super into brother fucking. They have a code word. There's like hashtag brother fucking. It is not my kink. Like, I'm like, no, please. I have too many like male family members and it like, but some people, you're into it in fiction, fine. You ship it, I ship something else. I'm into like himbos, if you know what that is. Yeah. Okay. So we can all have our things and like it and support each other. We don't have to all like the same things, but we can all like our things and be cool. It is argued in media sometimes that the portrayals of LGBTQA people in media both reflects and influence our views on who LGBT people are and how we feel about them and how we treat them and how they fit into society. And there's some truth in that. If all you see are very negative stereotypical portrayals of a type of person, you might assume that all people are like that. But fiction is fiction, reality is reality, and how much fiction affects reality is a little blurry. I think the best answer is to have diverse media, so you can have your like trash Harlem. You ever read Harlequin romance novels? I'm talking like Fabio with his shirt off and like, that's probably not like the height of fiction or anything, right? But you could read that and also read Jane Austen, and you'll be pretty like, you'll get a little bit of everything. That's fair. I used to focus too much on the potential negatives. Now, like I keep saying, enjoy the things for what they are. BL, boys love, is typically drawn by women for women, but that definition doesn't inherently imply heterosexuality. Academic Kazumi Nagake has written about the inherent queerness of BL because it's women writing for the pleasure of other women, even though the media is about two guys. Academic and fan surveys of fujoshi, which are fans of BL, both English-speaking and beyond, reveal that the audience is a lot less white and straight than everyone likes to say. The stereotype is that girls who like BL, fujoshi, or rotten women, as translates to, are these like white, straight, cis women who want to fetishize gay men. That's the negative stereotype. But it's just people who are enjoying a certain type of media, and they're far more diverse than you'd think. Dr. Bondinet, who's a researcher into BL and GL, have detailed in their research just how important BL is to gay men in Asia, where it's often the only visible male media and certainly one of the most available and accessible. BL is a booming industry in Japan, and the anime industry underwent a huge shift in the 2010s to cater to women's interest. Yuri on Ice isn't strictly BL, the creator makes it clear that it's a sports anime, but it's the number 4 best-selling anime of all time in Japan, and it made male-male romance like both canon and popular. Yeah, we're getting more and more. Stranger by the Shore. There's so many things that are coming out now. Given, we'll get to that. Yeah. God, that made me cry. Like towards. Yeah, we're gonna get into that. For past the movie?
Yeah, past the movie.
Oh, it just made my day. You're teaching me something. It's great.
I just rewatched it like a month ago. Sorry.
It's great. Yeah. So even if we're having like a trickle down theory, like companies are saying that we're willing to spend money on this stuff and we're getting more of it, which is great. The answer is always spend more money. Fixes all your problems. I kind of like went ahead of myself. We're producing more and more BL movies like Stranger by the Shore and mainstream network anime blocks on TV like Given, and this is all part of the boom in BL. BL is way more mainstream too. GL is still like slightly behind. Girls love used to be thought of like lesbian pornography in the West, like stuff made by men for men that was sort of exploitative to women, but a significant portion of GL now is actually made by women for women, but we're seeing a little less of it, and it's not quite hit the renaissance that BL has, but we're getting there. GL doesn't have the sheer numbers of movies. Like, we had 5 BL movies last year. This is late. In 2020, there was 5 BL movies, but GL doesn't have that yet, but we'll get there. It's also getting increasingly more sexual if you've seen Citrus, for better or worse. I have a master's degree in cancer oncology, so that's my like science background, and I like research a lot, and that influences a lot of this. But one thing I struggled with and then had to like pick up, let go, and pick up again is what is good representation in media? Is any representation at all, even arguably negative portrayals, better than having no representation at all? Isn't it also bad to demand that all diverse characters be so-called model minorities? Does everyone have to be perfect to be considered a valuable, well-written character, or do we not all have flaws? I'd argue there's a false dichotomy here. You can either be good or bad. We can enjoy problematic characters and relationships, acknowledge them for what they are, and simultaneously demand well-written, realistic, so-called good, diverse characters. It goes back to ship and lip ship. Everyone can like what they like. It's not wrong to enjoy problematic characters or relationships, and not all diverse characters need to be paragons of virtue to be valid. But I will acknowledge there's a difference between fantasy and reality, and I don't forget how far we have come from early negative stereotypes and tropes. Back in the olden days, there was gay-coded villains that had a lot to do with like how media was allowed to talk about certain things, and we can go sliding back into negative stereotypes if we're not careful. I'm going to quickly go over some definitions, but you all seem like smart people, so unless you get real confused, I'm going to make this quick. BL is simply boys love, and it's also known as yaoi, but that's a little older of a term. It's fictional media originating in Japan, but BL as a genre is expanding elsewhere to Thailand, Vietnam. There's other BL, but it's like home is Japan. And it's media that depicts homosexual relationships, so male-male. It was originally written more for entertainment than education, and historically was made by women for women to enjoy, but demographics and reasoning is changing. Gay komi, on the contrast, is written by gay men for gay men historically, and in the past were placed in opposition to BL and were called more authentic, as it was works about gay men by gay men for gay men. But the two coexist okay now. Like years ago, I think it was the 70s or 80s, like some BL authors and some gay komi authors kind of had a little, I think it was called the Something Ronso. They had a little bit of a debate back and forth in their magazines where they poked at each other a bit about who's the real valid media form. It's very strange, but now everybody's cool. Because there's a lot of back and forth, and some artists work in both fields, so we're like all good. Or at least I'd like to think we're all good.
We should be on the same side.
Yeah, like
There's an issue.
the haters are gonna come for us, so we got to team up.
Yeah, come on, we already got enough.
Yeah, we got enough problems.
We don't need to be fighting.
Yeah, infighting is just no good. Gay komi is often more sexually explicit and kinky historically, and you can usually tell the difference between gay komi and BL because gay komi has bigger, beefier dudes compared to like pretty, like the shonen like pretty boys. I forget the bishy types that you'll find in BL, but this isn't always true, and a lot more artists are doing like mixing and matching. GL, on their hand, or girls' love, also known as Yuri, is fictional entertainment from Japan depicting lesbian or female-female relationships. And I'm assuming you guys know what lesbian, gay, bi, trans, queer, and genderqueer are, but just lesbian, women attracted to women, gay, men attracted to men, bi or pan attracted to both or across the gender spectrum. Trans is people who were born and assigned a gender but identify as another gender. They realize they're not the gender they were assigned at birth. Queer is a broad term I like to use that covers all the LGBT rainbow when I just wanted to be all-encompassing. And genderqueer is a term I use when I want to cover, instead of all sexualities, I want to cover all genders. Note that not every show that has a gay relationship is necessarily a gay komi or BL. BL is a specific genre historically published in certain magazines for the most part, and historically has a relationship-focused plot, which is the same for GL. But again, things change all the time, how we define things as we progress forward. I'm going to get into canon versus canon. This is where I make people angry and awesome myself. Without creators straight up labeling what their characters are or explicitly stating a ship is canon, it is often hard to know what characters are or which relationship are more than a fan fantasy. Many creators, for many reasons, don't clearly label characters or their relationships. This can make discussing representation difficult because there are characters that the fandom views as gay or asexual or whatever, but the creator never clearly states or defines them as this. I'd argue this doesn't count as representation just because people assume a character is gay or pan or bi. When I determined, me personally, and other people use these sort of like barriers, when I am determining something as canon, I am looking for characters who openly identify as gay or lesbian, like they can state the words, or if they don't clearly identify, I'm looking at actions and relationships that are confirmed in the series and not fan-use speculation. This is easier to do with sexuality than gender, because if you have a dude that's fucking a dude in the manga, you're like, he's either bi or gay, like one of those things. If he's just like going around and how he talks about himself, unless he says it out loud, we have to go based on what he says, what he personally identify as in terms of gender. For a good example of straight up canon, it's What Did You Eat Yesterday? There is a gay couple that's been together for years. They live in a shared home. They share meals, all the people in their lives, their parents, their friends, they know they're together, they know they're a couple, straight up canon. They acknowledge that they themselves are gay, they say that they're in a relationship, this is my partner, very clear. You couldn't get any more clear about this being a relationship. When you get into the blurred area, I'm gonna do Premiere because that's like weak blurry, but I love it too much. But like, they never state they're gay. They never state they're in a relationship or in love or they're into each other. But that CPR scene, come on. Like there was no need for that much lip contact. Come on. That's not how CPR works, anyways. Yeah. There's other shows where they don't state they're gay, but they like live together, and people in the show seem to acknowledge the relationship as existing. Not just fans saying it, but like in universe, it's acknowledged. That would be sort of like, it's not quite canon, but it's getting there. And then we have like examples like Free, and the fangirls go wild and say like Maku Haro are like clearly a ship, but there's nothing in the media to actually define them as this. They don't do or say anything that would indicate they're actually in a relationship. That's just fan speculation. We're going to do some history. The first BL and also GL were primarily made by women who had a background in shoujo, which is manga aimed for young women, as entertainment. The early works challenged both gender and social norms at the time, but I do not know if you could argue that was designed to be progressive or LGBTQ representation. This was mostly women experimenting with entertainment for other women. These early works were creators playing around with both gender and sexual expressions, challenging some traditional beliefs about what women should enjoy, and they challenged tropes and created some new ones in turn. Modern BL has both more diverse audience as well as a writing base. There's more diverse creators. But this is where we come from. The basis is shoujo, and you can still see like the bones of it in even very modern work and how like characters are designed and how they act. Takamiya Keiko of the famed Year 24 group is credited with creating the first BL manga, which was known as Kaze to Ki no Uta, or the Song of Wind and Trees, and it was first published in 1976. It is important to note that BL started as a branch from shoujo and carried over many styles and tropes from earlier shoujo works. Gay komi, as earlier noted, is a genre of Japanese manga that depicts romantic or erotic relationships between two men and was written by gay men for gay men, typically. While there are examples of homosexuality in older Japanese art, modern gay komi started in 1986 with Barakomi, a supplemental issue of Barazoku, Japan's first commercial gay magazine. On the other side of the coin, the first GL manga was Shirohaya no Futari. I did not translate that. That was too many words. Which was made in 1971 by Ryoko Yamagishi, who was also part of the Year 24 group. The Year 24 group was a bunch of women who were basically born the same year, went to like art school together, like lived and worked together, and they produced a lot of like historic works, let's say, like a lot of groundbreaking new types of manga. And they managed to both create BL and GL, oddly enough, around the same time. Huh? Yeah? Changed the world a little bit there. Well, more than a little. Gender bending in anime and manga goes even further back than all of this. It goes back to the 1950s with something called Princess Knight. The title character was said to have both the heart of a boy and a girl. This series made everything else possible. More people are aware of Rosa Versailles in the 1970s, which the character Oscar is a woman raised as a man by her military general father in France. But that wouldn't exist if this didn't exist, because this pushed the envelope first. I broke everything down into like sections, and first I'm going to go over lesbian and bi female characters and representation, and of course we have Revolutionary Girl Utena as our primary example, but we'll go into it. And I go from good to bad. I will go over bad stereotypes, and then we'll go into good things to cleanse our palate. Unfortunately, there's a lot of negative old stereotypes, and they come tripping in every once in a while, but psycho lesbians is an old trope, but will never be forgotten. A psycho lesbian is a character whose sexuality seems to drive them literally insane. They're usually portrayed as psychotic and villainous. In older anime and manga, these characters were usually killed by the end of the series due to their evil ways. They needed to get taken out. Think of Nina from Code Geass or Chizuru from Bleach, though she was kind of a parody with grabbing Orihimi's boobs and stuff. She was more like a joke, but like it still was like the negative stereotype. Then we have the trope, which is the close schoolgirl friendship, like the gal pals. They're like, oh, they're so close, those gal pals always together. Depending on the reader-watcher, could be seen as romantic or very close platonic relationships. Writers have like leaned on this trope for years for many reasons. Part of it is to avoid censorship. Part of it is to appeal to the will they, won't they. Do you ever watch a show and the whole point of the show is like, are Mulder and Scully going to get together? Or Bones and what was it? Sully? Booth, right? I used to watch Bones, but like the show is about like an underlying like relationship, and if the couple gets together, the show tends to fall apart. Yeah, like Rachel and Ross and Friends, because you have that back and forth for the tension, and once the tension breaks, you lose the series.
Or even like Law and Order.
Olivia and Stabler, yeah, that went on for years.
It's still going on.
Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah. Everybody hear me okay? I'll just speak a little louder. This sort of like towing the line between friendship and not friendship is often accused of being queer baiting, but it's not quite. It does seem like shows and movies like Violet Evergarden, the movie, not the series. Or on the gay side, we have Fujo-bait sports animes. They use the literacies or tropes of BL and GL narratives to craft stories that aren't actually gay but will sell to like people who are fans of it because they know people like these things. So they just sort of give us part of it, so we'll buy it. Everyone knows that Violet... Do you see Violet Evergarden? She's dressed in white with another girl in white doing a ballroom dance. They look like they're getting married. Like, we know what we're doing here. It's a lesbian dream. She's dancing with another girl in a suit. But it's not GL. It's just sort of playing and poking at the line. The 90s. This is as far back as I go because I'm like aware of it. But some of you may not have been born yet. I'm old though, so I was young and then getting exposed to things and confused. The 90s was known for having lots of schoolgirl love. You often have that trope of gal pals I just mentioned. The gal pals are just a little too close for comfort for some people, but sometimes you want them a little closer, actually. There's lots of gender bending here. There's female characters who refuse to play a stereotypical feminine role. We see this in Sailor Moon Sailor Uranus is very, like, she refuses to be put in a box. She does her own thing. And Revolutionary Girl Utena has the title character who very much wants to be a prince, not a princess. Sailor Moon is kind of historic because it's an early canon lesbian couple that's respected and well written into the series, except the American, does everybody know what the American dub did? Cousins. They made it worse. The US release made the canon lesbian couple into cousins. This is unfortunate. It made me very confused as a kid because, like, you can see, like, cousins don't touch like they do. That's not, or they should, like, this is, well, I mean, maybe Alabama, I don't, sorry for, okay, sorry to the South. I mean, also, like, I don't know, there's lots of places in the world that have that cousin stereotype. Yeah. I would probably have benefited if the original US dub kept the canon relationship. I would have, like, come to terms with myself a lot sooner. The Major in Ghost of the Shell is shown to have romantic and sexual relationships in the manga specifically with both men and women. Bato, her partner, unfortunately needs to go get her. And they can mind jump into each other's mind because the whole cyborg body. He's like, oh shit, I need to go get her. We had an emergency. He mind jumps when she's in the middle of a sexual act with other women, and he mind jumps out and he's like scarred. He's like, oh God. Can't deal. Poor man. This is less clearly portrayed in the movies and anime series, unfortunately. As a big theme is transhumanism and hopping between different cybernetic bodies. What Major Kusanagi actually identifies as is a bit unclear, but she's known to be a bicon. Like, people know, like, you just look at her. But she is in the manga shown to have relationships with both men and women, and this is respected by the people she works with. Revolutionary Girl Utena is a little more blurry because no spoilers, but the end gets kind of, like, fucked up. Whether the relationship was real or not, this series is an early portrayal of a couple of feminine characters in a serious relationship that has romantic context. And also there was a lot of gender bending. Cardcaptor Sakura has a very cute sort of, like, loving side aspect where Tomio states several times that she loves Sakura, specifically romantically, but she realizes that Sakura does not feel the same way and she accepts that fully. She's like the opposite of the psycho lesbian. She's like the psycho lesbian's nicer sister. She's like, yeah, I love you. You don't love me. It's cool. I hope to help you hook up with the guy you like. It's all great. She's just happy dressing Sakura up in cute clothes and videotaping her, and it's a lot more cute and wholesome than that sounds. No, it's all very wholesome. She makes her very cute magical girl outfit. She gets her camera out. She makes videos that she watches late at night. It's fine.
Are you going to go to the other LGBT card soccer later?
Oh, the brothers?
Yeah.
Well, not brother and friend. He's...
Not gay brother.
Well, not gay brother, but her brother and his relationship. That's on the other side of the spectrum. I'm just doing women now, but I'll get there. Yeah, I separated out men, women, and into separate categories. That's sort of my, like, thought system. Unfortunately, this gets into cousins again because we can't get away from that. Tomio's mother, her mom was cousins with her mom. So they're second cousins. That's okay. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. But it gets weird when you know the subplot with their moms. Their moms were cousins, and her mom was deeply in love with her mother and got super pissed when she ended up marrying Sakura's dad, who was actually her teacher. Like, she fell out of a tree and fell into her teacher's arms, and they fell in love and got married, which is only kind of sus because she's like 16, was apparently like 16 or something. I don't know. But her mother dies, and her mother stays alive and founds, like, a toy business or something. She makes a lot of money, and she's like super resentful. She likes Sakura because she is the daughter of her cousin that she was in love with, but she really resents her dad, but eventually they get over it a little bit. But the whole like the cousins being in love and then their children also having kind of like a complicated relationship, but she's cool about it, is a little weird. But this is made by Clamp, and Clamp love triangles and decahedrons. They love making things very complicated. They love older, younger relationships. They love taboo relationships, star-crossed lovers, and they also like when people lose their eyes. It's like a trope in all their series, like somebody's got to lose an eye. So I don't question what they do anymore. I used to be like, what? I just like, oh, it's Clamp, it's fine. We'll get there. They also made Tokyo Babylon, which is a whole other like area of no. But I liked it anyways. Fiction. I like the fiction, not reality, not so much. In the 2000s, we still got lots of schoolgirls, but we had more bi and pansexual characters. We were getting more than gal pal tropes, though, but we're not seeing a lot of adult women loving women relationships. But part of that is simply because demographics that this media is aimed for. Shoujo, as the name implies, was and is geared for young female audience, and thus tends to have a lot of characters who are young women. GL, much like BL, branched off from earlier shoujo and kept many of the traits, including character types. So we generally see a lot more younger women portrayed in these series until more recently. In the 2000s, we got Haruhi Squared. Haruhi from the Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya is a god, but she's still a girl, who's arguably pan because she says she just wants interesting people or creatures. She doesn't care male, female, even human, alien would be fine, as long as you're interesting. Haruhi from Oberlin High School Host Club also claims she doesn't care about gender and she focuses on personality. So again, bi pansexuality representation here. This is also important because they're from very like tropey shows, but they kind of poked fun of it. She was like at a very early moe cute girl show, but oddly enough, they built a character who wouldn't necessarily end up with a male character because the way her preferences work, but despite being in a very popular moe cutesy girl show. Kashimashi is a great series, but you have to forgive it because it was the early 2000s and shit got weird, and I'm gonna explain it, but you just have to accept it, okay? There's aliens and some shit goes down. Kashimashi is a cute manga and anime series about Hazumu, who's an effeminate young high school boy who ends up getting turned into a girl by aliens. Okay. Yeah. Oddly enough, this happens right after he gets turned down by his crush, Yasuna, for not being a girl. So basically, he falls in love with Yasuna. And he goes, hey, we should go out, Yasuna. She's like, sorry, dude, I only date girls. And he's like, screw it. He goes off. He's very sad. He gets hit by a spaceship. The spaceship, like, obliterates him, and they were trying to put him back together, but they, like, lost his Y chromosome, and they only had the X, so they just duplicated it, and they're like, sup, dude, sorry about this, but you're stuck as a girl now because we tried to replicate you from your DNA, but we only had the X left, so this is what you're stuck as now. And then it keeps on getting weirder, if believe it or not.
It gets weirder?
Yeah. Now that he's a girl, female Hazuma then gets involved in a love triangle with Yasuna, his crush, and his childhood friend Tamari. Good thing about this series, it had very good character development. There were intelligent discussions on gender and personality and what love means to people. The bad news is Yasuna is portrayed as, this is the stupidest plot point ever and I'll never get over it. Yasuna can't just be a lesbian. If she was just a lesbian, it would make sense. But no, they gave her an imaginary disease. She can't see men.
What the hell?
The reason she won't date men or can't form good relationships with men is because she can't see them really well, and they like show some panels of her like first person point view, and like men are blurry and women are in clarity. And like it like broke her heart because she can't like clearly look at her father or something, and like messed her up. And I'm like, what? I'm like, what? It's not like, there's actually the thing that kills me is because I tried to do research on this, it was so bizarre. It's not real, no one actually has this. But there is a disorder or deficit. pitch of tone, like sounds, can be high frequency or low frequency. Some people, their eardrums, like the way they're set up, or as you age, you can also lose frequency. Some people can only hear high and some people can only hear low, or they just have poor frequency range that they can hear. So if you lose the ability to hear low frequency, it will be typically harder to listen to men because men talk at a lower frequency. And women and children talk at a higher frequency. If you lose the ability to hear high-pitched voices, you'd have a harder time talking to women. This would make sense if they tried to put the actual science in. Instead, they gave her a weird, non-sensible sight-based disorder, because how could you see men and not women, but you can see women? Like, how would your eyes even do that? Like, it doesn't make sense. It's so total sci-fi nonsense. I don't know.
I mean, can she see male animals?
You know what? They don't go into that.
You know what? Yeah, that's a good point. Is it all males or is it just male humans?
Some experts who like poke at series and try to like figure out why they were written a certain way, and this is sort of like a pop culture theory, not anything the writer has said, is that there's an old stereotype that lesbians just don't understand men or are scared of them. And that's why, and that like, or like all lesbians have daddy issues and gay men have mommy issues, and that's why they're like, but like that's not why anybody's, that's, yeah. So, but I don't know if the writer did it that way because he was leaning on a stereotype, or he just like wasn't thinking. Strawberry Panic, on the other hand, is complicated in other ways because it's lesbian Hunger Games. See, back in the 2000s, if you wanted to be gay or a lesbian, you gotta really fight for it. Schoolgirl Aoi transfers into one of 3 affiliated all-girl schools, and she quickly gets swept up with both school politics and upperclassman Shizuma. So the schools have like a tournament, and like one person is assigned like a knight position, but there's like a French term for it, and they gotta like do trials and save their like underclassman of choice, which is like their romantic-ish partner, to prove they are the true like strength person knight, and then they become like school representative, and it holds like power between the 3 schools. It's all sorts of nonsense. It's lesbian Hunger Games. Like at one point, like she needs to jump off a tower onto the other girl while riding a horse. Like I don't like, she's on a tower and she's got it, like she's trapped, like she's trying to rescue her, and she like rides up on a horse and she's got to jump off the tower and like land on the horse, and they ride off, and I'm like, is the school like accepting this? Like, what is your insurance rates?
Okay, well, the same could be said for Hogwarts with the dragon.
I mean, yeah.
I was thinking about the rescue scene where they have to go underwater and rescue the preciousness. Like,
I'm assuming there's like safety protocols in place or something, like safety magic. I don't know. There's no magic here. They're just like winging it. So I hope no one dies. Does anybody die? No, someone dies in the like past. I don't know. I can't remember. It's been a while. All the Yuri cliches are here. We have the all-girls schools, which is like a common setting for Yuri. The trope of one partner acting as a prince or the man acting very dominant. We have the tragic backstories. Everybody's got to have a real sob story backstory. It's melodramatic to the point of parody. It almost like mocks earlier GL, but it's a little too, like, I don't know. It's hard to tell what the author was going for here. The series was still clever and addressed the politics and pressure of life set in an all-girls school and the nature of female relationships. There was an interesting scene where a character is in the library talking to other characters, and they point out that they kind of are living in a special petri dish, in that they're surrounded by women in these all-girl schools, this circle of 3 all-girl schools, and forming these relationships and bonds and learning how to live. But once they leave the schools, it might be completely different. Like all the like relationships and political affiliations might kind of like fall apart once they leave this very like controlled environment. But that doesn't necessarily mean the romance and relationships aren't real. In the 2010s, we finally get a little more spicy and we get a little older. We're not quite up into adult, but we're getting like more than like very young characters. We're getting a little more variety in couple types and more explicit titles. We're getting further away finally from the innocent gal pal, girl crush tropes, while still mostly having high school age couples, but these couples are more openly having sexual relationships and expressing clear sexual feelings than previous titles in the past. Attack on Titan, I know it's not really canon, but please give me this. I need this in my life. I know, right? People will fight me, and I know it's not canon, but it really is. I just really appreciate how chill the rest of the cast is about these two, and they make it very clear they understand they have a strong relationship and they respect it. They're like, oh shit, where's Krista? Oh, she's probably with Ymir. Where's Ymir? She's probably with Krista. It's cool. That's a good one. Yeah. I'll go down with this ship. Straight up, like, anybody remember White Flag, Dido? I'll go down with this ship. Yeah. See, I keep on dating myself. You youngins in this room, you don't know. Citrus is step siblings, because, why not? Although this is criticized for consent issues and negative so-called characters, the tropes and cliches abound here, and they have problematic relationships. All these things can be found in old bodice ripper novels. This isn't like just a GL or BL things. This is straight up like Harlequin romance nonsense. As for troubled characters, people both real and fictional are allowed to be imperfect. My favorite thing in a diagnostic class is like a professor once told me of medicine was like, people are allowed to have things wrong with them. They're not only allowed to have things wrong with them, they're allowed to have more than one thing wrong with them at once, which is what makes diagnosis hard. And while he was telling me this from a medical standpoint, it actually works really well when dealing with people in the real world. People are allowed to be kind of broken, and broken in different and multiple ways, and you just kind of have to work around it. It might be nice to have some more well-rounded, wholesome characters' relationships to balance these sort of things out in fiction, but we're allowed to have trashy things or messy things or problematic things and get something from it. Who do you think wrote this? A man or a woman?
A woman.
You're right. It was a woman. I would have sworn on a Bible, good thing I'm not religious, that it was a...
I know my man.
Yeah. I would have sworn a man wrote this, but I learned that Saburo Uto, a female writer, wrote this, and I realized I had done wrong by the author because women are allowed to be kinky. Wherever you are in the world, sensei, forgive me. I have sinned.
You were describing this, I was like, only a woman would be that comes with this.
Yeah. I would have assumed this was some sort of weird step-sibling male fantasy, but I was wrong, because women can be kinking and want to do things with step-sibs, I guess.
We have the same thing.
Bloom Into You, on the other hand, made it around the same time, has respectful discussions of sexuality and desire, and touches on same-sex relationships as well as asexuality and demisexuality. First-year student Yu turns down a surprise confession from a male classmate, and then she in turn bonds with a female classmate named Toko because she also turned down a male confession. So they kind of bond over men being trash. They're like, man, these men, they keep on asking us things like, let's hang out together. Yeah, we should hang out because men are trash, right? Yeah, men are trash. And then Toko later confesses to Yu, and Yu doesn't first know to respond. And then sort of the trials and tribulation of forming a relationship, and that they're two people with different levels of attraction and desire, and how to like function with that. Kai-san and the Morning Glories is another cute little like girl show. Again, we have like cutesy girl. Then we have Other Side Picnic, which is where Yuri goes sci-fi fantasy. I give credit for this being a GL series where the focus isn't on the relationship. Most GL and BL historically was very slice of life focused on the romance, but we're getting more and more series where romance is there, but they have another goal. Like in Yuri on Ice, it's about the tournament and winning and going further in ice skating. In this, they're just trying not to die. There's like monsters and shit. They go into like this fantasy thing, sci-fi thing, portals, shit goes down. It's about survival. It's not a romance or slice of life genre like earlier series, so we're getting a little more diverse. However, this series kind of like had bad pacing and went into development hell, and I kind of dropped off on it. Unfortunately, we kind of go backwards recently with Adachi and Shimura. Historically, manga pushed the envelope further and anime was more tame because they didn't want to get in trouble. But now we're getting more like we have Citrus. So we're like, okay, we can keep pushing the envelope. We can be real, we can say things, we're not going to get censored. But then we went backwards again. In this series, 2 girls befriend each other while they were skipping class because the best way to meet people is to be delinquents. There's clear, yeah, there's, yeah. Clear same-sex attraction and longing is portrayed in the light novel, but it was subdued and made less clear in the fall 2020 anime. So the manga made it clear that this is romantic and sexual, but the anime went, let's make them gal pals again. I'm like, why? We've come so far, don't go backwards. And they're like, nope. This producer or whatever decided it was too far. It's an odd backtrack to the gal pal trope when a relationship could be seen equally as friendship or romantic depending on viewer interpretation. Here's a recommended reading list of lesbian bi representation over the years. Take a picture if you want. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, moving on. Now we get into the boys. Come on. Yeah. Hey, everybody deserves equal representation. All right, let's get the negative shit out of the way first. You know these people.
I know the one on the right. That was a very weird anime.
I mean, everything's weird, isn't it? We all are.
Not the stuff I watch now.
Okay. All right, so a really negative trope is the depraved homosexual or sometimes the depraved bisexual. And he's a villain whose evil involves his sexual nature. He's like the bad older brother of the psycho lesbian. She's crazy, he's just violent. They're a bad team. His motive is usually either his depraved sexuality or unrequited love or a mixture of this. Some good examples, or bad examples, I guess, would be the commissioner from Fake. He gets better after getting punched in the face. Sashiro from Tokyo Babylon and X was a depraved homosexual. In Yu Yu Hakusho, we have a character named Karasu who claims he wants to own Kurama and believes that killing him slowly and painfully is the most romantic and most intimate way to bond with him. I don't know why. And in Inuyasha, we have Jakatsu, who was a misogynist that hated women, who was also violently sadistic, who hit it on Inuyasha while trying to kill him.
Oh my god.
Yeah. Yes, but I blocked most of it out. Yeah. Getting a little less bad, but still not very good, is we got Gay for You. It's a very common trope in BL where a straight character will fall in love or become attracted to another man, but only that man specifically. It's basically bi erasure. The I can only love you trope can be found in other romantic literature, but this is just erases the existence of bi people. There's an example like in Tyrant Falls in Love. Suichi is literally homophobic, but he still ends up in bed with I can't say his name, Morinaga, because apparently Morinaga is his special exception to being homophobic. He's like a Republican, really. Please forgive me, any like nice Republicans in here, but like, come on.
Oh, come on, it's the truth.
In Okane no Ganai, which translates to no money, neither Kanao or Ayase has an interest in men before hooking up with each other. Okay, here's the deal. Ayase gets sold into slavery because his family and friends are garbage. He's like tragic backstory. He ends up taking on a friend's debt or some shit. He gets sold to this like gang mobster dude, and then he's like, yeah, now we're gonna fuck. I'm sorry, there's probably children in here.
He's supposed to pay off his debt.
Pay off his debt through sex, yeah.
It's every time that his owner is satisfied.
Yeah.
I'm keeping it PG.
Yeah. If you can call buying a person hooking up, I mean, loose. All right. Admittedly, multiple straight men in that series specifically end up being attracted to Ayase, so the whole like Gay for You is just like he's a magnet for that. Yeah. There's tragic gay or bury your gays trope. I hate this one. It's basically the trope of having gay characters have deeply tragic backstories filled with abuse and rape, and or you have gay characters that will inevitably have a tragic end. Like, they're not allowed to be happy. Okane Ganai is again a perfect example of this. ISA is taken advantage of. He's sold off to pay a debt and then forced into a sexual relationship with the man who bought him. It's kind of tragic and messy. But we also have modern versions of this, but it's kind of like a parody instead of like on the nose. Adam from Skate is a new villain who embodies many old classic evil gay villain cliches. He's both dramatic, a stalker, he's obsessive, he's got a tragic past, he's got daddy issues, he's got auntie issues, I don't know where mommy is. He's hypersexual, but it's all done in a very self-aware way. Like, the artist knew what she was doing, the artist-writer knew what she was doing when she created him. Like, she's very self-aware. He's more of a parody than an actual, like, they're making the stereotype to make fun of the stereotype, if that makes sense.
So over the top.
Yeah, like, it's hard to take seriously. Skate is not a traditional BL, but embodies a lot of BL tropes with a modern spin. I like that, putting in that it was a modern spin because they're on skateboards. Get it? Haha. Anyways, the 90s. Back in the 90s, and we're all like fashionable. I hear the 90s are coming back. Yeah. We got lots of pretty boys, our bishies, contrasting couples. Think pretty, small, light-haired boys shipped with bigger, dark-haired dudes, but not always. But usually it's like the blonde little boy with the big, dark-haired buff dude. But that was like the trope. We have some reversals, but like that was a trope. Tokyo Babylon, which I brought up before. Okay, get ready for this story because it's a little bit much. The main character is 16-year-old Subaru. Keep in mind because he's 16. He's a mage who protects Tokyo with his twin sister, Hokuto, and they are assisted by Sashiro Sakurazuka, who's a 25-year-old veterinarian who claims to be in love with Subaru. Several things. Veterinarians are usually older than 25. He must have like just graduated from school, but he has like his own practice, which is kind of sus. Also, he says he's deeply in love with a 16-year-old boy, and no one seems to want to stop him. Like, not even the sisters. The sister totally ships them. But it's fiction, and it's also Clamp, and Clamp is just known for controversy. Yeah, it gets worse. Come on, let's keep going.
It's worse than that now.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Spoiler warnings. Sashiro is from a clan of evil assassins, and he had actually met a very young Subaru, only much younger than 16, after Sashiro had his first assassin kill, and then he turns around and marks a little like baby, like toddler Subaru. And then he finds him later when he's 16 to test himself to see if he can feel true affection and love. And if he can't feel true affection or love, he's just gonna kill him. This is some weird, bizarre yeah. This goes very wrong. He ends up killing Subaru's sister instead.
What?
Yeah. All comments saved to the end. All comments, questions saved to the end. We're gonna go on this trip together and then we'll hopefully get somewhere. This series has a trope of the large age difference, 25 versus 16, underage character, but this is not unique to BL, and the writing team Clamp has hetero couples with large age difference as well. There's like a teacher-student thing in a couple of their stories. And arguably, Sashiro acts as a predator. I personally struggle with fictional homosexual relationships that are portrayed as abusive, dangerous, or with these large age gaps, because I grew up in a time where the stereotype of dangerous gays were coming after your children. Does anybody remember Anita Bryant? I can't believe she's still alive. She was literally an orange juice model who did the Save Your Children campaign that said gays couldn't be teachers and had all these like ads about how gays were dangerous. She tried to make gays lose their jobs. But you know what came for her? Karma came for her because her granddaughter is gay and got married. She gets to be old and angry, and she can't do anything about it. But when I was young, her campaign, or the remains of it, 'cause she started in the 70s and sort of petered off in the 80s. When I was very young, there were still people who believed some of the stereotypes she had pushed in media. So I became afraid of things that looked like that stereotype. But the truth is, the people who wrote this don't know Anita Bryant exists. So it has nothing to do with stereotypes. It's just they were writing for drama. While these relationships aren't my cup of tea, they may be your cup of tea, and that's fine. They're fictional. And I don't think we should judge other people for enjoying them. I do think we should be aware of the historical stereotypes and cliches, but I also acknowledge these stories were written in an environment outside the one I grew up in, and you can't really judge other cultures, literature, and media from your own lens. You kind of have to get into their world before you can analyze it, and that can be very hard. I doubt Clamp even knows what the Save Your Children campaign even was. They're too busy writing, questionable things. Also, do you see how they draw the characters and have them in very fashionable outfits that match? Clamp is very good at that. Fake. I'm going to do you a favor. Read the manga, skip the OVA. It's crap. Fake is a manga series about two New York City detectives named Rio and Dee who start working together at the fictional 27th Precinct. You may say, hey, Aaron, why do you know the 27th Precinct is not real? Because I tried to find it. And you will get some New York City cops very confused. It's also weirdly in a lot of media, not just Japanese, but in several manga, if they need a cop to be somewhere in New York, they say the 27th Precinct. And the reason for that is because it literally isn't real.
That's why they use it.
Yeah. It's convenient because you don't want the real cops coming after you. Their feelings might get hurt and it might be messy. The good thing about the series, it reminded me a little of Yuki and Shuichi from Gravitation, and that they go from typical relationship dramas, they got to get to know each other, they have to deal with each other's past, and they handle romantic rivals. They're hard workers who have somewhat realistic jobs. A lot of BL has people with crazy jobs, like rich writers or mobsters, or they just have huge amount of monies. They fight over the cost of dry cleaning. They're real people. They're fictional, but they feel real, if that makes sense. In fact, at the time of this writing, they had jobs that were seen as admirable. Times have slightly changed, but anyways. Their relationship is seen as normal by the people around them, and they even basically end up as guardians for a troubled teen. Bicky's very cute. The bad news is that D generally falls into the man stereotype where he's in control of the relationship, where Rio gets a more feminine portrayal, particularly he's seen as the mother to the teen they take in, and how he responds to D's advances. But Rio is also no pushover, and it's not similar relationship dynamics. People say that the top-bottom relationship in some gay media is mimicking a straight relationship, and that's some sort of stereotype. But the thing is, we all fall into certain patterns for better or worse, and that doesn't make it any less real. We might not all fall into the same pattern, but patterns exist. D is proudly bi from the start of the series, and Rio starts off the series by insisting that he's straight, though after getting a relationship with D, he seems to be leaning towards identifying as gay, despite previously having relationships with women in the past. I don't know if this is kind of semi-bi erasure, or because you have D being proudly bi, or Rio's just figuring himself out. On the other hand, you have D and Rio's boss, named Berkeley Rose, who's the commissioner that I talked about earlier, and he's not afraid of abusing his position to get closer to what he wants, and sadly, what he wanted most of the time was Rio, and he was desperately attracted to him. He tried trying to keep D away from Rio and getting Rio for himself, and then he gets punched in the face and is very sorry. He vaguely fits into the stereotypical role of a predatory gay or a depraved homosexual bisexual, but that punch in the face really turned it around. Antique Bakery is a sweet, pun intended. I had the entire set of manga, and it had scratch and sniff covers, so you could scratch the pastry item and it would smell like strawberries. It was amazing. My mom accidentally donated them to the library when I went to college. It was awful. Yeah. But someone somewhere in the world got an awakening when they went to the library and found those. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Very sweet manga and anime series about handsome guys who run a bakery. It's this is on brand for me. baked goods and hot dudes, thank you. Take my money, please. Like, if this was the actual place you could go, they'd be rich. Good news is the head baker, Yusuke Ono, he's gay, openly so. He's very skilled at what he does. He's a nice dude. People like him. Bad news is this is a slice of life and no magic, but they gave him a curse. Like, slice of life series, no magic, but the one character who's cursed is the gay guy. He has what they call demonic charm, and brace yourself for this. If he finds another man attractive, that man will instantly fall in love with him, whether that man is gay, straight, or otherwise. Or even if that guy is already in a relationship. If Yusuke Ono looks at a dude and sees any attraction, that dude will magically fall in love with him, and it causes some turmoil, and he gets fired from every job he has because of like the infighting, because guys end up fighting over him. This is really weird, and it's like a plot point that doesn't really make sense with the rest of the series, and I'm like, you could have written this so many different ways. Why did you go here? Like, why did you make being gay a disease? That's so weird. I don't know what the author was thinking. I don't know whether it's supposed to be contagious gay or like danger gay trope. When we get into the 2000s, we get slightly less contrasting characters. We still have the hair color contrast and some contrast in body size and height, but not as much as previous. Like, originally you had the big dudes and like the little guy, and now it's getting a little like, their body types are getting a little more like in line, but there's still some differences. We're evolving away from Dorito bodies, like big shoulders and like, yeah, like the big shoulders and then the hip, like the triangle shape, and like the large yaoi hands, like they could like cover someone's face, and like the really pointed chins. We're getting a little away from that. We still have a bit of it. Gravitation was my first BL. It's an anime and manga series about an aspiring band called Bad Luck, and the relationship of the band's singer, Shuichi, with the popular romance novelist, Ariyuki. It was my first BL series and has a very special place in my heart, even though I can admit it's like not aged well. Like, if you go back and look at it, you're like, this might not be the healthiest relationship in the world. It's like, I probably shouldn't base my romantic aspirations on a guy that like kicks me out of the apartment just because he feels a little angry sometimes. Oh God, speech is hard. Yuki and Shuichi have a very typical relationship in some ways. They have to get to know each other. They get used to each other's friends. They get used to each other's habits, both good and bad. And they have to deal with each other's families, particularly Yuki's family is complicated. You could argue it's a realistic portrayal of a relationship if you discount the fact that they're both famous and have like kind of fantastical careers. Like, singers and writers exist, but like, I kind of have a soft spot for stories about people that you would actually meet in the world versus like a best-selling, Times-winning, Nobel Prize-winning novelist who has millions of dollars and comes from a like rich royal family. Like, those sort of storylines are a little like off to me. Arguably bad, but I don't know, it's fiction. Yuki and Shuichi both have emotional problems and are very like hard on each other and themselves. Yuki has been through some serious childhood trauma, including the death of his mother and attempted rape by a trusted teacher. Yuki is rude, he chain smokes, and he drinks way too much. He gets angry, which is not healthy. Shuichi is often irresponsible and immature, and they don't always act as good role models, but people are allowed to have things wrong with them. We've been over that before. Not everybody has to be perfect, and there are both equivalent dynamics in fictional heterosexual relationships, and real people, real relationships also have. Like, abusive relationships exist. I wouldn't say they're quite abusive, but they hit points that are a little rough. But real people go through these things, as well as fictional couples of all types. So it's not something we can ignore, but we kind of have to write it responsibly. And when we read it, we have to recognize like some things that might be seen as romantic, in the real world, it wouldn't be very romantic. It's kind of like the wall slam. We're not running around like cornering people, and we're not demanding people give us relationships or throwing people in an elevator and forcing a kiss. Because that's only hot in fiction. It's less cool in person when you're trapped in the elevator.
Unless you're into that.
Unless you asked first and planned the scene, then that's different. I've seen a lot of criticism that Yuki and Shuichi are portrayed as stereotypically filling the roles of a heterosexual relationship, with Yuki being portrayed as the man and Shuichi being seen more as the stereotypical girl character of the relationship. But I feel like that's discounting that men can act feminine, and that's fine. You can express feminine traits, and that's real and valid. I will acknowledge that this dynamic was a very common trope in early BL, but it's probably because it was mimicking the shoujo it was based off of. Remember, their roots were shoujo, which were manga aimed at young girls and typically had a male and female character relationship. And people took those tropes, but then like switched up the characters and settings a little. But you can still see the shoujo coming through. Like they're so used to writing a certain way that they keep writing that trope in. There are a lot of reasons people point to when looking at old BL tropes. It was derived from earlier shoujo styles. These dynamics may have been what the early writers, artists were used to working with. I've also seen it debated that earlier works in BL were more designed for female readers to self-insert. Like, the submissive character was supposed to be something women could pretend to be, like insert themselves into being, like a blank slate, you like put yourself in, and then the like more romantically aggressive character would be like you're, you know, isekais and like harem shows, and like the male protagonist is like a blank box, like he's super boring and doesn't have a lot of features, but all these girls are like freaking in love with him. It's because like they're originally designed to be self-insert, like you put yourself into a character and then have the things happen to you, or you're supposed to visualize that. So it was written a certain way to appeal to that, but we're kind of pulling away from those tropes. Junjo Romantic came out a little later, but it's kind of like a reboot of Gravitation, in my opinion. It's a series that starts out with the character Misaki being tutored by his older brother's friend, Usagi, who's a popular romance novelist. He's rich, moody, and has a bad relationship with his family, and he smokes a lot. He sounds like somebody else. Wait, what happened? This guy? How did you get over here? What happened? Yeah. Misaki and Usagi end up ending up in a relationship, and the series also portrays, it has two side series to it, where Usagi's childhood friend Hiroki gets in a relationship with someone he's mentoring, and then Hiroki's coworker Miyagi gets in a relationship as well. So there's like two side plots. Good news is most of the characters in these series are super smart, very successful, like professors, writers, doctors. They're respected in their communities. You could try to argue that they're like the LGBT, like at least employment icons, role models in a workplace. Bad news is most of these characters are like an emotional mess, but like people, again, they're allowed to have things wrong with them. Usagi and Miyagi act, huh?
I was gonna say, that's kind of all.
Aren't we all a little bit of a mess? We all don't stalk people and throw them in a car, though. Like, we'll get there in a second. I mean, unless they ask, like, again, consent and set up a scene, maybe, then it's fine. Yeah, they've set that up. But Usagi and Miyagi act like possessive stalkers with no concept of the word no. Like, no doesn't have a lot of meaning to them. Miyagi actually starts dating his ex-wife's little brother, who's also the son of his boss. I'm going to tell you something. I was once sat down because there was like some controversies at the hospital I was working at, and the dean, the interim dean says, he's like, you guys can, like, you know, have relationships with whoever you want. Just please don't form relationships with patients' family members, and please leave each other alone, because it makes the lab and the working environment very hostile. Like, if you get a breakup and you have to work closely with people in a like high tense environment, it's no good. And you should never, no matter what position you're in the hospital, from tech, researcher, blood drawing, doctor, nurse, whatever, you should never get in a relationship with a patient or a patient's family member, because there's an imbalance of power. The only place those relationships should exist is in fiction because it's too messy and not ethical in the real world. And he said something that I stick with me. There are millions of people in this city and even more in this world. You can find other people to, sleep with. But I'm like, but somebody pointed out we didn't leave the hospital very often because we were all like very tired, overworked grad students and researchers. It's true. You kind of have a limited window, but go outside, get some sunshine, meet some people. Just get out once in a while. Yeah. Even in the snow, because it was New York, it was fun. Again, though, these characters, though, this isn't real. This is fictional, so people can do what they want. We're here for the spice and drama. Consent issues in BL are often hotly debated, but research done by B.L. Garden and others has shown that more sex is consensual than not in BL. Series with non-consent or unclear consent do exist, I can acknowledge this, but it's important to note that all these characters are fictional and no real people were harmed here. Oh no.
There was some stuff that I saw.
Hold on. Oh wait, hold on. All right, I do have to bring up one scene because it drives me crazy and I have nightmares about it. Miyagi gets a relationship with his ex-wife's little brother and boss's son, and they have a back and forth and they're fighting. And at one point during a fight, they have a whole tragic sob backstory too for both characters. At one point, the son, he's like, oh, I'm angry at you, you're angry at me, and they're in a breakup period, right? And he goes to hang out with his Australian foreign exchange student friend. Australian friend only speaks English, or Australian English, I guess. And they're hanging out. And Miyagi drives up in his car, drags his romantic partner and throws him in the back seat. And the Australian is and he drives off to the ocean because they're gonna have a fight and work things out. But the Australian friend is just sitting there and he cannot verbalize to anyone else what has happened because he can't speak Japanese. And it's played for laughs, but actually if that was reality, that would be terrifying. Could you imagine your friend's just been dragged off by some dude you don't know? And you cannot verbalize it to anyone around you. I need help, please. And that Miyagi seemed to almost acknowledge that he knew this guy wasn't going to be a problem because he can't tell anyone else. And that's a sort of level of I don't want to say it's psychotic. I don't know what the word for it is. It's manipulative. I don't know. But it's a scene. No one actually gets hurt. This is all fictional, and they work it out anyways. But we would not actually run up to someone we were fighting with, throw them in the trunk, wave to their friend who can't do anything about it, and drive off to the ocean.
Well, I mean, some of us. I
was going to say, you don't know me.
All right. Assuming only making an ass out of you and me, you're right, yeah.
Well, you just assume that some people will not do that.
Moving on to the future, or the near past, the 2000s and 10s, it was a good time. It was a good time to be alive. We get more stories where being gay, bi is not just, instead of making it the whole person, their whole story is them being gay and coming out, we're making it just an aspect of their personality. They got more shit going on. They got medals to win. They got aliens to fight. They're doing shit. The relationships are either not the primary point or plot of the story, or the interpersonal relationships exist on the same level as other plot points, such as winning an event and fighting evil space otters. Also, we're getting further away, once again, from the Dorito body, pointy chin, and yaoi hands, and our character body shapes are kind of being more equivalent. Love stage is a little bit complicated. We have Izumi and Ryoma fell in love with Izumi because he was dressed as a girl for a commercial. So this is a little complicated, but Izumi's mom is a famous actress, and his dad is a singer, now a producer. And years ago, when he was a little tiny little thing, they were filming a commercial, and they needed a female flower, flower girl for the wedding commercial. And they're well, we don't have a girl, but Izumi's super cute, so let's put him in dress, it's cool. And Ryoma met him when he was dressed like this and assumed he was a girl, and they filmed the commercial together and then got separated and grew up into young men. But then they decided to do like a 10-year anniversary of the commercial. I don't know how this works in their world. And it gets a little rough. This cute couple goes through a lot of trials and tribulations, and I'd argue their story falls roughly somewhere between Gay for You and Love Transcends Gender, because Ryoma starts off as believing he's straight and being attracted to someone he thinks is a woman, finding out that Izumi is a male, and how their relationship sort of progresses and how they identify as themselves and each other. Despite having a lot of old tropes, I was impressed by the focus the series put on Izumi's personal goals. He wants to be a manga artist, but he can't draw for shit. But he tries real hard, and he tries to do other things, and he keeps going for his goals. He's the little engine that could. Yeah. And unlike some series that it's only the relationship, or it's only the there's stories where the big dude, like in Okame and I, the dominant partner has the mobster, the money, the power, everything, and the other guy just sort of exists in his world. They're equals in that they're both going for their own goals, which is good. There's attraction, relation dynamics that were discussed. They're both educational and entertaining. There's some old cliche tropes. It probably would get canceled if it was put on today, but it was good for the time. I'm sorry, no COVID, but really dry. I can't say this word, it translates to classmates, but I hated the art, sorry, but the story is so cute. It's a slice of life about how two opposites attract. They're very different people. They fall in love, and they go through trial and tribulations of falling in love and growing up. At its heart, this series is pretty simple and very straightforward. It subdues or averts a lot of BL tropes. It's just some people who fall in love and have to get used to being apart and going after different goals and then being back together, all sorts of things. It's just very slice of life, wholesome. We got Yuri on Ice, which everyone should know, and if you don't, you should watch it right now. It's not technically BL. The creator makes it very clear that this is meant to be a sports anime, but Victor Yuri is straight up canon, and literally everyone in the universe ships them, both inside their universe and outside of it. It's so popular, they nearly broke the internet in a con in Texas that happens to be this one. What was that, 2017? Was anybody here for that? Was it crazy? Yeah.
I wish I was there.
No.
No, I heard it was chaotic.
It was chaos. They had all the creators and artists and people working on the show here, but they didn't have the line set up well, and there was too many people, and it was just the police had to come. There was lots of
Yeah. It's not planned well.
Yeah. We're doing better now. We have lived, we've learned, we're all fine.
But I think it's because Yuri on Ice, I think when it was first released, it wasn't it didn't blow up right the minute it released. It kind of was it wasn't late.
It was a slow burn and then an explosion. Yeah.
It blew up it wasn't out of nowhere, but it was it wasn't released in day one. It was oh my god. You know what I mean?
Well, for the longest time, we didn't know if they were playing us. Are we actually going to get and then at the end, they're oh, we got it. Sarazamai was actually made by the same creator of, I broke my brain for a second, Revolutionary Girl Utena. So in Revolutionary Girl Utena, it was pretty crazy, but they were limited by the time and what they were allowed to get away with. He apparently for this just lied to the studio what he was doing and went full on.
How do we know this?
Because it came out later that they had no idea there was going to be anything about butts in this, and then later that became a big plot point.
But
Yeah. The tragic, committed gay cop couple being manipulated by magical space otters is arguably the least weird and possibly the healthiest relationship in the series. I'm not joking.
what?
The tragic committed gay cop couple that are being manipulated by magical evil space otters is arguably the least weird and healthiest relationship in this entire series. Everybody else is far more messed up. They adopt the girl, yeah. Enta, this one here, openly admits to being in love with Kazuki and kisses him while he's sleeping, which is generally not something you do. He's a poor kid in a gay panic disaster mode, and he really needs more love from the fans because everybody like hates him online because he's a mess. But like, aren't we all? He gets a lot of flack for being whiny and making really bad choices, especially that kiss was not like the best choice, but he doesn't even seem to care. Who hasn't made some bad choices? But generally don't kiss your unconscious friends. On the other hand, you can kiss the guy you're in love with, but you should give him a little warning first because he looks a little surprised there. Yeah.
Wait, there was build-up to this.
There was build-up, but
There was not just let me just randomly kiss you. There was
But like he was like crying. It wasn't really seemed like the time.
I mean, but that's the whole trope is he's attracted to him because he's frail and like going through something.
But they all get stronger together, luckily. Given is very well-rounded. There's healthy, frank discussions on bisexuality and homosexuality, and abuse as well as like consent comes up in the movie, which it was handled really well.
I thought it was too.
Yeah. Stranger by the Shore is, if nothing else, is gorgeous. It also explores difficult issues of coming out, family rejection, and loss against the beautiful backdrop of Okinawa, which is incidentally the setting for Skate. Okinawa in the past few years has been the setting for several BL animes and other manga, and now I want to go to Okinawa really bad. I just think it's a beautiful setting, so people like using it. It's the islands to the south of Japan. Like, it's far, far south. And they apparently have the most beautiful beaches, and, like, the stars are, like, the most gorgeous. Yeah. This movie also has a supportive lesbian couple, Eri and Suzu, who ship the main gay couple, and they have cats. They're great. Here's my recommended reading list. I'm going to count to like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1.5, 1 3/4. What? That's fake. We already listed it. Disclaimer to all this is that I have added so much to this PowerPoint that it's like kind of like gotten out of control, especially because sometimes I have to do this presentation in less than an hour. And the only thing I leave on here to give myself a little grace in running this panel is if I've watched it myself at least a little bit, or it's so culturally significant and other people have talked to me about it that I feel I can talk about it. If I know there's other media out there and there's more GL, BL, and if I went over every single series that ever existed, I would never get out of here and you'd get bored of me. Yeah. But that doesn't mean there aren't other great series out there. But I tend to like stick to things that I've watched myself or are super culturally significant and that I've been told about enough that I feel confident that I can discuss it. All right. Oh, my Lily, you were done so wrong by the PR team, but you were such a great character. Yeah, we're gonna remember, we always start with the negative and then we do a palate cleanser, it's fine.
What did they do to these people?
So, okama is an older Japanese slang for gay man, but in many anime and manga, it specifically references effeminate gay men or drag queens. And they're often portrayed as super negatively. This is One Piece, and this is Okama characters. And they're often portrayed as super unflattering for a laugh, like comedic reasons.
I kind of feel attacked by the one that looks like Joker right there in the front center.
They're seen in everything from One Piece to Okane ga Nai to the more recent Secret XXX and therapy game series. Arguably, Haruhi's Dad and Ouran High School Host Club falls into this category. And while I am well aware Okama bars exist in Japan, I've never been in one. I don't know what they're like. I know that Okama is a term. I know that it can either be derogatory or not, but it's so far outside my cultural understanding, I have a hard time deciding, like, I can't judge this. Like, they use it, from first glance, a lot of the portrayals seem super bad and, like, stereotypical, but I don't understand the culture enough to, like, have, like, a firm stance on it. From my Western standpoint, my knee-jerk reaction that this is a negative exaggeration stereotype, but I don't actually know that. So I don't want to get all imperialistic and try to judge a culture from the outside. The term itself, Okama, is very, very old, and it refers to a cauldron or a pot. So Okama literally means cauldron or pot, and this in turn is a reference to a vagina, and I don't get where this is going. That's as far as I got doing the linguistics, and I just gave up. I don't know if it's supposed to be some strange metaphor for how, like, effeminate gay men work. I don't know. I don't want to know. Too often, the genderqueer representations go straight to cross-dressing or drag queen, which those people exist. There's nothing wrong with them, but we need a little more than that. We have the mama-san type bar characters who are often, like, a joke character. We need female to male characters and male to female characters, but I would like to see them as more as just than comedic portrayals. But we have ones that are not necessarily always comedic or portrayed like super negatively or distorted. Okame Ganai has, she runs the bar, and she sees Okama bar. And over in High School Host Club, we have Haruhi's dad, but he's kind of a mixture of tropes, and he has his good and bad moments. Gender bending, like I've mentioned before, is pretty old. Gender bending for plot is older than Shakespeare. It goes back to even Greek and biblical. Like, there's been characters who've had a gender bend for, like, Thor in one of the old, like, myths had to dress as a woman to trick someone at one point. We have Mulan, who dressed as a man to fight in war. We had Joan of Arc dressed as a man to get into fighting. Like, gender bending for plot reasons or to save someone or to do something has been around forever. But it does not necessarily make someone trans, especially if they're doing it for a task or reason. But sometimes people do gender blending for plot to hide writing a trans character, just to get it published, because if you straight up wrote a trans character back in the day, it might not go anywhere. Chevelle, I can't speak French, which is sad because I have some French ancestry, but Chevelle Dion was based on an actual historical figure who might have been a trans woman, but also might have been intersex or non-binary. This person was a spy back in the day, but it's very complicated. They had an autopsy where it was declared that they had male parts and feminine features, and they lived as both a man and a woman in their lifetime. But in the anime, the male protagonist gets possessed by the spirit of his dead sister, and then has to do things. So like I'm like, is it supposed to be trans? Are we like switching for plot? What's going on here? So he's a man whose sister got killed, but she possesses him, and he like turns sort of into her and goes do things. And I'm like, I'm not sure where this is, what story you're trying to tell here. I feel like this is gender bending as plot that seems to be masking for the actual lived experience of an actual trans person based on the historical figure, but we don't have enough knowledge of the historical figure to even say, so that's a little confusing. Noriko in Fushigi Yugi takes on a female persona, Korin, after the death of his sister in order to let her spirit live on as him, but he later cuts off his braid to set her spirit and himself free. But later, the manga artist who created this series came out as non-binary or X-gender, which has made some fans speculate that Noriko was really supposed to be trans or non-binary, and the gender bending for plot was just a cover.
Like they're trying to sell a story without getting in trouble, so they kind of like mix some things or plot points over it. So it's not, they're like, oh, they have to do this for the plot, or to save the princess, they had to be this other thing, but they're not actually trans. And part of that might be just to get the story out there without getting like hit by censors. But it's hard to tell because some of these works are older, and unless the creator actually says so, we never really know. The Stellar Starlights from Sailor Moon were female warriors who were searching for their lost princess, and they formed a boy band in order to find her, because how do you find a princess? Apparently you gotta turn into boys and form a boy band, because that's how you get the girls, I guess. Arguably, is this gender bending or a form of transgender expression, or just some people who needed a good disguise and weren't afraid to cross-dress for a cause? Who knows? It really depends on the translation and interpretation, and we also don't know whether they physically changed or just changed outfits. That's another thing that gets argued. Some representation of gender queer characters. Kino was raised as a girl, but wears gender-neutral or typically male-style clothing, and they use gender-neutral pronouns, and they prefer not to be called boy or miss. They tell several other characters to use gender-neutral pronouns for them. Wandering Sun is a manga that has exploration of growing up as transgender and discusses gender fluidity. The series tells the story of a young student named Shuichi who's described as a trans girl, and she has a friend, Yoshino, who's described as a trans boy. This series gets a little flack because Yoshino's storyline, spoiler, Shuichi transitions fully, but Yoshino ends up not fully transitioning. They choose to go back to the gender they were assigned as, and that angered a lot of people. But I also wonder if the author was trying to say that, like, you're allowed to experiment and find out who you are. The story was a bit messy, so people didn't like the ending, but it had a lot of good heart, I think. Tiger and Bunny has Nathan, who's arguably gender fluid, and he alternates the pronouns that they use. The pros is that this character is confident, strong, and successful, and a hero as well as a strong business owner. The cons of this character is that he's very touchy and grabby with other characters. One male character in particular, he grabs somewhat unconsensually on a regular basis, but this might be a self-aware nod to older Akama-type characters or stereotypes. Lily, my beloved Lily, is a trans girl who's far more than that. Her being trans is not the biggest part of her story. There's so much more to her. But it is acknowledged as part of who she is, and it's fully accepted by her idol zombie group mates. She's got bigger issues, like being dead. Unfortunately, while her storyline was incredibly well handled in the actual show and by characters in the show, this has not been handled well by PR promo posts, where she's referred to as male and they dead name her. Like, literally in the media releases,
They use the name that they used to go by before they changed.
Like, her name is Lily, but she was born and given another name. And the PR material actually, or the promo material actually, calls her a boy and refers to her old name. And like, it's like such a like confusion, because like the series handled her so well, but like the promo material that was published about the series like totally like mishandled this character. Like, it's like, who on your PR team did this? Fire them immediately. Yeah. Stars Align is a sports anime that also manages to have an LGBTQ character whose primary storyline isn't their LGBTQ identity, kind of falling in place with Yuri on Ice a bit. Yu's main role is team manager. That's his purpose. He's team manager. He states that if they had to label themselves, the term they would use would be non-binary, but they don't want to be reduced to a category. Thank goodness the kids in this series are super understanding and stand up for each other, because adults suck. The adults do not handle these young characters dealing with their sexuality and like lives. There's like another character has a very abusive father. His mother like has no like sympathy for him. There's a scene where she points out she already has 3 daughters, so they need to be a son, and that immense pressure to put on a child is just like, he has good friends though. His teammates are like, that's what you need in this world. You need support.
Where the inspiration is from.
I would wonder if the author themselves has been through quite a bit and had supportive friendships and like the team bonding. Here's my recommended reading list. And again, I've said this before, that gender bending goes back to Princess Knight in the 1950s, but we didn't see characters clearly identify as non-binary or trans until much more recently. There's a lot of headcanons and fandom theories about earlier series, but authors were not always clear in earlier works, perhaps due to censorship, so it's really hard to say. This is one of the hardest parts to address because the absence of something doesn't necessarily mean it's there, if that makes sense. It's hard to prove a negative. Character portrayed as not having overt sexual or romantic interest is not necessarily asexual or aromantic. They just might not be in a relationship right now. Some characters claim no true romantic attachments to others, but often these characters are portrayed as psychotic, such as Isaiah from Durarara maybe, or otherwise seen as damaged goods. This isn't how asexual, aromantic people actually work. They're fully functional individuals with jobs and friends. There's so many fan theories and vague comments from writers. Luffy from One Piece is one that people like to pull up because the writer said a few times that Luffy has no romantic interest and that the story never is meant to have romance. It's an adventure story. But that doesn't mean Luffy's asexual. It just means he's on an adventure and he's far more into food. There's not a lot of clear canon to work with. Ayuki from Kashimashi prefers to be an observer of romance rather than participant, but the word asexual or aromantic is not used. She just claims she's willing to listen to her friends' romantic problems and help them, but she doesn't want a relationship of her own. But she doesn't use the term, so it's hard to say. In This Is Love, we have a demisexual character. Demisexual by being people who they don't form sexual attachment until they have an emotional one. LGBT manga generally refers to manga with queer characters and themes, and rather than being side characters or plots, queerness is essential to these stories. And it's not a genre defined by magazines and audience like most typical manga genres like shonen or shoujo. This is kind of like a new thing. LGBT manga is often educational, either overtly or subtly, and it does discuss issues of identity and discrimination in Japan and elsewhere. Most LGBT manga run in seinen magazine, meaning they are targeted for young adult men, as opposed to BL, which is targeted at women, Gay Komi, which is targeted at gay men, and GL, which is targeted at both women and men. Seinen is the grown-up sibling of shonen, like basically little older shonen. A lot of queer fans probably read LGBT manga, but because it runs in seinen magazines, it's true that there are a lot of straight readers of this as well. Because LGBT manga often run in seinen magazines, this does put them in a more visible role, which theoretically means they're educating readers and making it more accessible for queer youth who might not be able to obtain BL, gay komi, or GL, either due to social stigma into buying these genres or the fact that a lot of volumes are age restricted. This is a little more accessible. LGBT manga is not necessarily inherently better than BL, gay komi, or GL, and many authors actually write for both. In the same way that not every heterosexual romance story is educational or trying to teach a lesson, LGBT manga can and does coexist along less educational genres. There are plenty of BL manga that read just like an LGBT manga, the only difference being the magazine in which they are published. Also, more and more LGBT manga is currently being published in the US. And here's some examples. Oh wait, that already happened, so that slide doesn't count. All right, so I have enough time for a few questions before they boot me out of here to clean up. So if you have a question. Yes, I did. They were delicious. Also, I want to give something to my demo person because you were so nice. Okay. Yeah. So, okay. I have little prize packs that are for later, but I figured I'll give you one because you were such a good demo person. Okay, some of these are literally rando. I have no idea what's inside them. This is a Tomy, which is like girl, like game stuff. Like it's very. This is Fruits Basket. This is Full Metal Alchemist, and these are literally random, and I have no idea what's inside of it.
This is I'll take that.
Okay. Thank you for letting me wall slam you.
Oh no, it was.
And I asked first. Consent is key.
I've never felt straighter.
Yeah. I mean, I'd also demo the car thing, but I need a car. And also an Australian.
Sorry, I volunteer people in the car.
Well, you gotta go find a car.
I brought my car.
Do you not see the family for Harley and children?
Thank you so much. And
All right.
thank you for this. This was very educational.
I'm glad you guys enjoyed it.